remember when Victoria's Premier, the chairman, Dan Andrews, had the absolute gall to call his government's response to the COVID pandemic a triumph? Remember that?
And if we hadn't have acted the way we had, then, well, you really don't want to think about how bad things would have got here. So it's a triumph of what government in partnership with community can do.
Well, they weren't the words used by the Victorian Ombudsman, Deborah Glass, today. In a report tabled to the Parliament, she said the travel permit system was inhumane and a bureaucratic nightmare. Between July 9 and September 14, 33,252 border exemptions were submitted and just 2,736, 8%, were accepted. If that's a triumph, I'd hate to see a failure. And Glass found that the overwhelming majority of applications didn't even get to a decision-making level. Joining us now is Melbourne resident and media writer for The Australian, Sophie Elsworth. Sophie, good to have you on. This is similar to the hotel quarantine disaster in many ways because the process of exemptions was so badly resourced, so badly run and overrun by their own incompetence.
Chris, the sheer arrogance of our Premier Daniel Andrews just never ceases to amaze me. Thank heavens for Deborah Glass to speak out about this, our Ombudsman down here. Absolutely shameful that Victorians were locked out of their own state. There were many people who applied for exemptions for compassionate reasons, health reasons and so forth. Many of them, I think it was 8%, you said, only were allowed in. I mean, we had over 90% who were knocked back. And the fact that this Premier gets up in front of Victorians and says that it's a triumph the way we've handled things down here is absolutely shameful. And I hope Victorians are paying attention to this man because his arrogance is just off the charts, Chris.
When I heard Deborah Glass deliver her parliamentary report today, I could only think of the 20-odd thousand people who desperately wanted to get back into Victoria, or vice versa, but back into Victoria mainly, to see people who are ill, to see family they haven't seen. Some of them had had the first shot. Some of them had great reasons to get in, but they weren't even considered. The decision maker didn't even get their application, and they would have waited with bated breath for some kind of reply, and they got nothing.
Chris, can you imagine the heartache for so many Victorians or Australians wanting to get into Victoria for various reasons during the pandemic, to be caught up in this bureaucracy that is down here? I mean, we've got more public servants than ever, that they're not even going through the paperwork, and these people are sitting there on a knife edge waiting to hear, will they get the green light? Being fobbed off. I mean, we saw so many stories through the pandemic of people not being able to say goodbye to loved ones, being stopped at the border, many people having to pay rent back in Victoria that was stuck over the other side of the border. I mean, this is Australia we're talking about, and it's a shameful event in our history, something that I hope that we look back on and realise, Chris, was a shocking error of judgment. And I think Deborah Glass penned this beautifully to say that this was disgraceful and inhumane and something that the Premier should really hang his head in shame over.
Look, I'll just say one more thing about this. To think that a Minister of the Crown or the head of a department would put 20 people in a room expecting them to handle thousands and thousands of, exemption applications and not expect that there would be thousands and thousands, show me that they shouldn't be anywhere near the administration of the Victorian government. It's just awful. And then this on the same day, Sophie, Victorian Mental Health Minister James Merlino was warned before Victoria's fourth lockdown that there were suicides linked to job losses in the state and that another lockdown, quote, could again have an adverse effect on mental health. Another Chairman Dan triumph, huh?
Chris, what concerns me through the pandemic down here in Victoria, I lived and breathed this absolute nonsense where we were boasting, are we going to get to donut days? How many COVID cases? This sheer obsession was out of control. I would like to have seen during that period why these ministers and premiers, or our premier, were trying to boast about their handling. How about they put up the numbers of cases of admissions to hospital, people suffering mental health, suicides and the like, for Victorians to really see a true picture. This goes far beyond COVID cases, but they were obsessed with this COVID zero strategy, and the toll it took has been immense across the community, Chris.
Like, when does the accumulative impact of rolling stuff-ups, and there's just 2 today, not lead to this government being sent packing? Like, seriously.
Chris, it's probably hard to understand when our viewers out there, and yourself even, don't live here and realise that we're a heavily socialist state. We've got a Labor government that's ruled the roost here for the best part of 20-odd years in the past 30 years. We've got a weak opposition. Finally, they're having a little bit of traction, but they've got a very shallow talent pool. So people are looking at who can we vote for at the next election? What are the alternatives to Chairman Dan? And unfortunately, at the moment, doesn't appear to be a lot of alternatives. So this is when the opposition, Matthew Guy and his team, really need to step up, show what they stand for, and for once and for all, hold this government to account, because they've been in power, I think, too long. They've dominated this state. They've got full control over our lives, and it's about time Victorians woke up to this, and hopefully they'll consider very carefully who they vote for at the next election.